see, I see, I see.
because Lake Worth High School is not on here, the middle school is not on here, and now there are the two minorities.
Yep, yep, yep.
And I was like, I hadn't seen the actual board before. I was like, you left off, so you only focus
saw
on the
that.
important people. So I was like, okay, all right, I understand, but.
Oh, yeah, cool. I usually drink decaf, but I'm drinking decaf. I'm going to be alive. I'm supposed to run a 5K.
And that will affect your 5K how?
I won't sleep.
Hi, Commissioner.
Hello, Commissioner. Good, how are you? What, the space? I love it, actually.
Excuse me, we're going to get started shortly, so if you could all find a place to sit down, it would be great.
There are bathrooms that are right here, if you're curious about that.
Hi. Sit down. Have a seat. We're going to start. Good morning. What time is it? Okay, we're getting ready to go live. Are you ready, Darian? Good morning. I'm William Waters, Community Sustainability Director for the City of Lake Worth Beach. Welcome to our first charrette on mobility in the City of Lake Worth Beach. I want to introduce a few people. Well, the speakers are actually behind you. They're up there. So anyway, William Waters, Community Sustainability Director for the city. Welcome to our mobility charrette for the city. WGI is here as our consultant. I'll be introducing their team in a minute. I do want to recognize some of our electeds. Mayor Resch, who is approaching the seat. Welcome. Vice Mayor McVoy has arrived, I believe. Did see him somewhere. Commissioner Stokes is here, as well as Commissioner Diaz. Thank you for coming. We have a fairly packed day in just a few hours, and so we're going to try to move things along as quickly as we can. Our goal is to get as much input from you all as to your understanding and questions of mobility, what mobility options may be appropriate for Lake Worth Beach in the context of how our city is designed, also looking at funding for various items. The second part of our planning initiative will begin in October, and we're going to be looking at actual infrastructure or projects that can bring about different forms of mobility in the city. Today's sort of discussion is going to be led by Lisa Neeson and Angela Biaggi from WGI, and she has a team here, or they have a team here, and I'll let them introduce them. But so in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to them because we want to spend today getting input from you and not listening to me or other people talk too much that are not stakeholders in the system. So with that, we're going to turn it over to Lisa. She's going to go over a presentation, and then we're going to get going.
All right, good morning, and thank you everyone for turning out on this beautiful day. I know a couple of people walked up and biked up, so it's a good mobility themed day. A lot of what we're going to be covering, you may have seen if you attended a public meeting on this, but today we're really going to talk about, okay, how do all these ideas begin to translate into the mobility improvements that the city needs to meet existing demand, but also think a little bit into the future and be prepared for that. As William said, we are heavily focused on funding and tying everything we do in the plan into these funding programs that will actually get these projects built. And because of that, if you've looked at other transportation plans before, you'll notice some things are the same. We're still going to look at existing conditions and where the gaps are, but we're also going to be looking into the future as to what the modes could be and what the trends are and how we get out in front of it. We will be talking about complete streets and what is right for Lake Worth Beach. And again, we're going to round it out with the funding programs and what's important to position the city to compete for those programs successfully. Let's see. Welcome. We're going to go over what is mobility and why is it different from transportation, what to expect in the process, what these mobility concepts are. Why am I using the word mobility instead of transportation? We're going to look at the funding programs, and then we're going to break out and do activities in an open house kind of way. Today's program, this is a formal presentation, but it's an informal day. So if you need to leave, feel free. We just ask that you provide us with input. So today's program is about education, but it's also hearing from you because you're the ones who travel the streets, the sidewalks, the curbsides every single day. And we need to know how to focus on those projects that are going to get our system up and going. So the old way really focused on how you get from point A to B, and it was usually focused largely on automobile traffic and travel. If you look at all the standards, if you look at the way that we've always done street design, it's really been about expedient travel for drivers. The new way steps back from that. Moving vehicles is still important. I do want to impress upon people that cars have been and will continue to be a part of the mobility system. We're not here to ban cars. We're not anti-car. We're really here about a balanced system so that people can take trips easy, safely, conveniently in something other than an automobile. That makes traffic smoother for everyone who needs to drive. It makes traffic smoother for people who are doing deliveries. I don't know how much you order from Amazon, but that is constituting a bigger part of our traffic system. So we are looking at moving people and moving goods. We also are looking more on access to jobs, to entertainment, to the small businesses downtown. So it's less about how you get from A to B and more attention to why are you taking this travel in the first place, and then how do we meet the system for you? And then, of course, the options. What are the benefits of doing this? Well, first of all, if you focus on moving people and goods instead of just cars, you get a much better system, a much better outcome. By looking at things like land use and parking and infrastructure, you really get all the puzzle pieces in order instead of considering those things in silos or separately. And then focusing on these modes is important because there's so many new modes out there. Last year, there were more sales of electric bikes than electric cars, which is stunning because the sales of electric cars are like through the roof, but the sales of e-bikes are equally increasing. And if you think about affordability, if you think about access, those might be a big deal in the mobility system of the future. So we'd like to hear your thoughts on the use of e-bikes and e-scooters. Whether you ride one or not, whether you like them or not, we need to hear from you. What to expect? So, of course, today is the kickoff towards the mobility plan. And we're going to do this in two phases, as William said. The first phase is the analysis and hearing from you and doing a lot of research. And then phase two is identifying those projects that you want to get done and funded. This also includes changes to programs as well, but we're really focused on these projects that need to get done, where the gaps in the system are. We also have a website that we've established, and that is going to continue throughout the life of the project, and we are going to be continuously adding features and information to that. So as we finish our assessments, our tasks, our workshops, all of that will be posted on the website, and we hope that you will visit often and share it with your friends. So what are some of these mobility concepts? So we're going to look at modes, we're going to look at transit, complete streets, parking, land use, and some new concepts and some new vocabulary. We have this slide back here on a poster, so don't think you have to memorize this right now. But we thought it was important for us to document what all these different modes are. And honestly, standing here and watching what's happening on the street right now, practically all of these have been passing by. There even was a golf cart this morning as I went to get coffee. So we've checked almost every box except for the trolley. And a couple of trains as well. What I really want to pay attention to are these emerging modes, because right now we don't know exactly how popular these will be. We don't know the timelines, but we do know that market share is growing. And so one of the things we want to hear from you is which of these modes do you think is important for us to consider? And we're going to have dots at the poster with emerging modes for you to kind of vote yes or no. Red for no, green for yes. Of interest in all of these, I've already heard this morning, are things about e-skateboards, e-scooters, and where they belong and where they don't belong. We will also be talking about circulators, which are super important for those trips that are too long to walk, but kind of too dumb to drive or too painful to find parking. You may have seen Circuit or the Freebie. These are starting to grow in popularity in West Palm Beach, in Fort Lauderdale, really across Florida right now. And so we want to hear from you about your experience using these and whether or not you think those are an important part of the system. I want to point out that in the United States, which also applies to Florida, 50% of all trips are 3 miles or less. Actually, it's 60%. That's stunning, and we've built our environment so that for a lot of people, the only way to carry out those trips is in a car. So if you're thinking about how we need to fix our mobility system, how are we going to subtract traffic? Some of those shorter trips, if we make that possible for a good number of people, all of a sudden your system is more balanced and it's easier for every single traveler. We'll also look a little bit at some of the autonomous options that are coming up. We decided to put urban air mobility here just because if you read the headlines and some of the transportation technology, press, that market is growing. And if you think about some of the barrier island traffic or things like that, we just felt like we might want to consider it and ask you about it. And then with some of the connected and autonomous and electric vehicles, of course, those are really catching fire right now. Oh, actually, literally. Thanks, Elon. Let's talk a little bit about those circulators, about that flexible transit. Again, these are going to be important for shuttling people around. And one of the things that these companies are finding is they are a great way to help shuttle people from parking that isn't exactly right downtown. So some of the periphery parking, which could be used for employees, which could be if you don't like to hunt for parking and you want to go somewhere directly and know that you have a shuttle, you can kind of cheat that parking problem. So parking is one of the use cases there. Just pure transit. You know, we always think of transit as Palm Trans, right? The buses. These are now a really valid type of transit in and around town. The way it works is almost like an Uber for these companies. Is you just call them up and say, I want to ride from here to there, and boom. The trick in this is having enough vehicles in the system to make sure the wait times are tolerable. And most people tolerable is a 5-minute wait, something like that. So that's really the trick in all of this. Speaking of tricks, Tri-Rail is now approaching ridership that equals pre-COVID numbers. The trains are back. So is I-95 and all those problems. And if you go to the train stations in the morning, something you will see, especially in Palm Beach, is the number of people getting on or getting off with these foldable e-scooters or foldable bikes. And that's because they probably live just a little bit too far to walk. And they're very compact, and once they get to the station, they can access some of these. This is incredible because it does mean that all of a sudden you have more and more people who have access to trains, but it's also something else. It opens up land for transit-oriented development. So maybe we can start to think about affordable housing that may not be super close to the station because developers really like that land. That comes at a premium. But if you just go a little bit outside, all of a sudden you have more people who have access. But to make that work, you've got to have the infrastructure. You've got to make it safe and easy in and around your train stations. When I say we like to talk about ties to funding, anything to do with transit-oriented development and affordable housing gets extra points. So we're going to think about this in the study. As far as mobile apps, these are here today. You can actually get PalmTran and payment options for PalmTran on your phone, which makes it easier and more convenient for riders. Anything we can do to reduce the friction of people who can take transit, the better. Lake Worth Beach is home to some of the most popular PalmTran routes up and down US 1. And so that popularity will only grow if we can help people and make it easier, for example, if they want to go up to West Palm Beach and back and not pay for parking. Complete Streets, also a very popular program at the national level. Complete Streets just means that you begin to think about different modes and how you do street and intersection design. It does not mean that every street has to have accommodation for every single mode. And for that reason, we're going to be looking at complete networks. So it could be that if we are trying to decide where bicycles should go, maybe down Dixie is not a good idea, but maybe one street over. And if you go to West Palm Beach, that's exactly how they've done those routes. So we'll be looking at those low-stress routes for cyclists. We'll also be looking at whether or not we've got problems with intersections. So one of the things is safety, and we're going to be looking at crashes and near misses. And we're going to see if there's anything about that intersection design that makes it more dangerous than it needs to be. Can the cars see people who are getting ready to cross the street? Are there designs that make cars go faster when you know that pedestrians are going to be in the same intersection? So we'll be looking at some of those things. Parking. So there are some parking studies already out there, and there is demand for parking. So we will be looking not only at added supplies and whether or where to put that, but also how do you better manage the parking you already have. We just did the same thing for Delray Beach and found a couple of tricks that we can help here in Lake Worth Beach as far as employee parking, as far as signage and wayfinding, and the use of technology to help spread that parking around and make it more available. We'll be looking at curbside management and what's happening on the sidewalks. This was not a term that was around 10 years ago. It was more like deliveries. That's what we talked about. But all of a sudden, you began to see a lot of competition for sidewalk and curbside space, whether it was parking or deliveries, or even during COVID, we moved a lot of activity out to the street. And when COVID started to recede, people are conflicted. It's like, wow, we would really love to keep that outdoor dining. Whereas others are like, no, we need to kind of bring it back to where it was pre-COVID. So we're going to be looking at what the demands are and what kind of things we could do to actually moderate that demand. On to land use. Of course, we talked about transit-oriented development and really what that means, and especially with improved access. How can we engage developers who can start to build transit-oriented development where there's frequent transit service? Transit-oriented development looks different from regular development. It's usually a little bit higher density, it has a bigger mix of uses, and it has reduced parking. So those are the types of things that go into that equation. We'll also look at mobility hubs. These are smaller than transit-oriented development, but what can you do around your bus stops to actually support more and different types of vehicles? Scooters, I know the shared scooters are a hot topic around the country. Now that we're about 5 years in, there's some best practices from around the country. The other thing that is starting to happen is cities that banned e-scooters, they're starting to put in shared e-bikes. They're a little less messy. They're more safe. Riders tend to be a little bit more on their best behavior when they're on a bicycle instead of a scooter. So really, how can we start to insert this constellation of access around the city? Electric vehicle charging. This is also a hot topic. It's one where there's some money out there. There's a lot of money out there, actually, but in the first wave, USDOT is paying attention to access from highways. So you've got I-95 right here, so you're along a corridor, so let's see what we might be able to do within the first half mile of that corridor and identify locations that would be ripe for grants. Electric charging is easy if you live in a single-family home. It's not so easy if you live in multifamily developments. And so really what we want to do is see are there tricks, are there ways, are there designs that we can bring that to developments like the one we're next to right here. Some of it may be on the curbside, but as you can see from the previous side, there's already a lot of competition for the curb, so that just kind of adds to the things we put there. But there's got to be a lot of lessons learned out there. And then some of the mobility concepts. We're almost done here. Safe Routes to School is a very popular program in Florida. There's a lot of money there at the state level and a lot of money over the next 4 years at the national level. It is a priority of FDOT. It is a priority of the state. And the cool thing about the infrastructure bill is Safe Routes to School used to only apply to elementary and middle schools. It has now been opened up to high schools. And as we all know, we've got Lake Worth High that's up near near I-95. It could use some connectivity and safe routes to school. And you know, what high schooler doesn't want a souped up e-bike, right, to get to and from school? There's also a need to begin to see if we can get more students who are getting to school walking and biking. Some of the car lines are extremely long, and so we've got to be able to give an alternative through design, through policy, that reduces that traffic, because that's just impinging on a lot of commuter traffic as well. So again, the theme of this mobility study is really trying to rebalance all of this using all these new concepts. Vision Zero, last year the city adopted a resolution. It basically is a goal of reducing casualties, whether it's any kind of harm, to bikes and pedestrians and drivers to zero. It's an ambitious, lofty goal. It's a new way of looking at things. From this chart, the one that we have the most to do with the mobility study is actually the safer streets, safer people, and safer speeds. I know that drivers don't like to be told to slow down, but you know, post-COVID, everybody's speeding. It's a national trend. When lockdown occurred, people went out, there wasn't a lot of traffic, speeds went up dramatically. Now that there's more people on the roads, unfortunately, that habit is sticking. And so are there ways that we can design streets so that people go a little bit slower? A lot of these interventions, the time that the extra time is less than a minute, because there's slower intersections or a complete street. So it's not really adding a lot. It's adding a lot less time than you would think. But we've really got to nail this one right. Low stress networks, again, we're going to look at those bike lanes and how we can get that network going. Programming streets. This is a brand new concept. I mean, really brand new, but it's the concept that streets don't have to act the same way 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and that are there ways that in the morning the street might do one thing because that's what the demand is, but at a later hour it could do something else, and then it can do something else. Clematis Street in West Palm Beach is one of those programmable streets where they use bollards to actually, sometimes you can be parking, sometimes you can reserve it for emergency responders, sometimes it can be street fair, sometimes they can just do whatever they want to. So we'll look at concepts like that and whether or not that's a fit for any of the streets downtown. Urban air mobility, some of these have pilots, some of them don't. The main thing here is flight paths and rooftops and landing places. That's really what we need to look at, and whether or not the demand is coming, and should we think about it now. This is the next to last slide, again with funding. So safe routes to school, safety, complete streets are programs that have a lot of money. If you look amongst these programs at their selection criteria and at their priorities, climate resilience, access, economic development, and equity, if you have projects that check all those boxes, you're in a much better position than one that doesn't. And so we will be looking in our analysis those locations where we can check all those boxes, especially for safety. So keep in touch with us. We've got the website. What we're going to do now, does anyone have any questions? Yes, sir.
You talked about right now Clematis Street allowing closed streets. Right now they're going also on Mayor Keith is actually stopping, what's his name, Mayo.
Yeah.
Closing the 500 blocks.
Oh, okay. Just a question about the programmable streets on Clematis, where there's one block where they're lifting that closed street, Festival Street, for lack of a better word, on the 500 block. Yes, exactly. I can't comment on yeah, exactly. But it's a good point. And I think the main thing there is that there are a lot of people now writing letters and pushing back on that because, not because of any political reason, but it's just like, we like to take our kids there on Friday night. So that's a good question, insightful, but can't really comment on the politics. Yes, ma'am.
Hold on, let's the people have be recorded so it's on.
Thank you, William.
I actually have two questions,
Okay.
and one I'm not clear on the e-bikes. Are they allowed to ride in the bicycle lane, or because they're motorized, they have to stay on the street?
By and large, they're also allowed on the streets. That's a good question because there's 3 different types of e-bikes, and they're called Class 1, Class 2, and Class 3. Class 1 is called pedal assist, so the motor doesn't kick in unless the rider is pedaling. There's no throttle on there, and those are actually the most popular. That's selling like hotcakes. The second Class 2 has a throttle, but you can it's only moderated up to 20 miles per hour. For a Class 3 bike, the speed is up to 28 miles per hour. I have not yet seen prohibitions, but we'll do that as part of our research.
Okay, my second question is, when it comes to children's transportation or school-age children's transportation, what is the position of the school district? Are they going to be willing to help funding, like electric scooter chargers or alternative modes of transportation than a car on their school grounds?
Right. So that is actually part of the outreach program that we will do with the school system, just to get their opinions on what their situation is, what the highest need is, what their desires are. 10 years from now, we want X, but they're an important stakeholder.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I did a walk through going to the middle school.
Yes.
With a group of people, and it's very, very dangerous where the kids have to go through all days. So I saw the word funding there.
Yes.
And I was thinking, like, how the city, this funding can come, but for a walking pedestrian overpass. I think this is a very secure solution for the kids.
So what we will do is look at that. You know, everything's on the table for analysis right now.
Yeah.
And just a lot of times what happens is you have to make the case to the funder that is the best solution to the problem. And so what we need to do is look at the problem and evaluate that, even quantify it, and then look at the solution. A lot of them have a cost-benefit type of analysis, so that's what we would have to weigh in that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, thank you.
Hi. Yeah, I have two questions. One is, one of the problems that I've seen around Lake Worth Beach, at least, is extensive jaywalking.
Okay.
And what is the intention or the plans to address that, to decrease that risk to the public?
Jaywalking, for those of you who don't know, it's crossing where there's not a crosswalk. And a lot of times it happens where there's a great distance between the intersections. You know, to tell you the truth, I'm just not sure. A lot of times enforcement is the best angle, but a lot of time that enforcement ends up penalizing, you know, certain groups of people, maybe non-English speakers who don't really understand, you know, the signs and things like that. So I think the best way is to make the intersections as attractive as possible. There may be places where a mid-block crossing is one of the best solutions as well. So what we can do is we can evaluate where there are some of these problem areas. And again, that kind of gets to evaluating near misses or hazards that don't have a crash, but that have a root cause.
Okay. My second question is, you know, with your street redesigns,
okay,
it appears that that's primarily going to be on the main streets like Dixie and Federal.
Yep.
What is the plan to avoid overloading the neighborhood streets that, if you are familiar with it, you know they're one way usually, right. Cars parked on both sides, so the extra load potentially is going to be a disaster right. to the neighborhoods.
Right. So one of the things we've been doing is looking at other cities that have instituted complete streets programs, and with a special attention to was there overflow traffic. And what we want to do is look at those examples and see, okay, where there wasn't overflow traffic, what were the conditions? Where there was overflow traffic, what were the conditions? I was just reading one yesterday from Alexandria, Virginia, where it was a very contentious complete streets project. And what they found is that traffic actually was going faster. Like nobody lost time. There was no overflow into the neighborhoods. But what happened is because everyone was going slower, there were less crashes, and traffic just ran a little more smoothly. The faster cars go, the more distance there is between you and the car in front of you. That's a lot of street space that when you're going slower, you actually gain. It's counterintuitive. I know it doesn't make sense, but sometimes when you slow traffic, it actually moves slower. Again, we need to look at the conditions around each and every example just to see if they apply.
I just want to point out an irony that I experienced this morning coming to a mobility workshop, is that I parked in a parking garage that is essentially empty, and I don't think it's well used except for maybe residents in this particular bohemian structure here, residential. But I'm paying $2.50 in an ambiguous way just to make sure that I wasn't ticketed attending a mobility event in an empty parking lot, and I had to ask people, do I need to pay? So And this is an area of the city that needs redevelopment.
Right.
And needs access and needs to have more visibility in terms of the public perception of there is parking in the area, and the access to that parking garage, which represents a substantial capital investment, is kind of hidden, and it's hard to get to. And I just wanted to point out the irony that, that represents. And the first 2 floors apparently are public parking, and that's a little ambiguous. And you also look at the pay station, and there are no parking signs right by where you pay on the 2nd floor.
Got it.
So there's confusing signage there.
Good morning. I went in the same garage, and then I went out because I figured I'd grab the free parking. That being said, the objective of the study, I believe, is to come up with projects that can be funded in the future.
Yes.
And how detailed will you get those projects? Will they be ready to go for a lap project at that level?
So another key stakeholder is the Palm Beach TPA, Transportation Planning Authority Agency, because your likelihood of getting a grant also hinges on those projects being listed in the TPA's work plan. And so what we want to do is make sure we get to them as soon as we identify those projects to get them listed. There's also usually matching funds for some of these programs, most of the programs. And so where is that 20% going to come from, that sort of thing? Working with the TPA is going to be vital.
Great. And just a bit of a comment and a question as well. You put the flights and whatnot in there, so I don't think that there's a whole lot of funding for those yet. No. But I think Complete Streets started between 10 and 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And prior to that, all of these ideas weren't fundable. So I would like for you guys to have maybe a parking lot area for things that aren't necessarily fundable today, but might be fundable in the future, especially as we hit some of these areas that we don't know what the solutions are going to be, like the scooters and the e-bikes. Some of them are fundable today. Some in the future might be great ideas from this group here that the feds haven't figured out are great ideas to fund yet. So please have a parking spot, and please let us know, hey, this one is good for the parking spot. This one is good for real projects that can be funded in the next 3 to 10 years.
Right. No, that's a really good point, because especially for e-bikes, there's a lot of latent demand. People who want to ride, but they don't quite feel safe. Or one of the things we're going to look at is origin and destination. So are there, especially for lower income workers or service workers who are going to the island, if we can tell main corridors that people are taking, that would be a future type of looking. And maybe today doesn't make sense, but if you put in the infrastructure, all of a sudden, you've reduced a lot of people who have to drive. So that's a good point.
Awesome. And
I just want to take this opportunity. When we talk about the TPA has a citizen advisory committee.
Yes.
We don't have a member on that. This is a good opportunity to let people know that are interested in mobility. We are going to be having a workshop soon about advisory boards. So one of the openings will be that citizen advisory committee space on the TPA. It's separate from what Ronaldo does. It's purely citizen advice. But you guys are interested in mobility. Getting the word out is hard. So keep your eyes open.
That's
awesome. And I also want to just point out that most of the funding is going to be external funding, either state or federal funding that's going to be coming into this. I know a lot of citizens are worried about our tax dollars, and especially the local tax dollars. So I really encourage all of this because it brings in funding from outside, and knowing that is very important to all of us.
Right. And the infrastructure bill is 5 years. We're in year 1 into a 5-year cycle. We're not sure if year 6 it's going to be renewed. And so that we are coming at this with a sense of urgency to get these on the docket and get them funded now, as quickly as
I
possible.
do want to elaborate a little bit on the question that you asked. Phase 2 of the project, of the study, we will be identifying conceptual projects with estimated costs of their construction and development, and then go back and try to prioritize those both by what the citizenry and the electeds would like to see happen first and which ones correspond with funding. But they will not be shovel ready. We only have a limited amount of money, and one project's design could wipe out the entire budget. So just to know, just to temper expectations a little bit.
Right. And in some of the funding programs, they actually favor what they call low-cost distributed to just to that point, so that they can fund more smaller but effective programs instead of a couple of big bang programs. So that's what the big programs are for. Infra raised. These are more smaller and distributed. And now with modular and quick build infrastructure, you can get a lot done. So.
When I go down to West Palm, and I think they've done some of the things you're suggesting, the biggest problem is they don't have any place for the trucks to park when they're offloading, goods to particularly the restaurants.
Yep.
You have the beer trucks, and so the question is, where are the trucks going to park? Where are they going to offload? And are you going to set aside a specific place for that? And is that going to be 24 hours? And is it possible to get trucks to come in the middle of the night? And I guess the answer is going to be no. But that's a real shame, because they come at the height of the traffic and they're blocking the flow of the lanes.
We're going to look at a couple of things that are going on. One of them is to have that curbside available for morning time offloading. Maybe 9 to 11 is what I see most commonly. There's also a couple of technologies that are being tested out there for curb reservations. Washington, D.C. did one, and they found it cut double parking by like 60%. It was super effective. It's unclear whether or not the delivery drivers like that. They don't like to be told that they can only come at a certain time. They're going to go. Yeah. Right. That we were actually talking about whether or not there's going to be a trend towards smaller trucks, more smaller trucks, just because the bigger ones are pretty problematic, can't fit in the alleys, that sort of thing, and whether or not we can mandate that. So that's going to be part of the study.
I had a question. We had recently done a workshop session with FDOT for the Dixie Road Diet.
Yep.
And they said that was going to be an 8 to 10 year planning project. Is this mobility plan going to work in tandem with FDOT, or is this completely separate, and is Dixie Highway off the table for this discussion?
I think that we will pay attention to what they're doing. It depends on where we find the greatest need, looking at that crash data. And it could be that it's more effective for us to look at non-Dixie Highway projects than to spend a lot of our resources looking at it when, in fact, there's not much we can do. So it's going to be a balance, because we do have to pay attention to it.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
So I noticed the equity funding.
Yes.
And I didn't see it till like second to last slide, which kind of disappointed me.
Got it.
Because our city, downtown, is not wheelchair friendly at all.
Right.
And I would like to see some major thought into that. And I'm not in a wheelchair, but I do know people who are, and I've asked them, what's it like for you to go down Lucerne? Or down, and because there's outside seating for restaurants and stuff, people are not very considerate of people passing by.
Right.
But the streets, people have to take their wheelchair in the streets because our sidewalks are horrible.
Right.
So I'm very glad I saw the equity funding. I hope that we take really big consideration of that. I think that human beings in general don't necessarily think about people, or don't necessarily think about the things that don't affect us personally.
Right.
So we need to focus on that.
And I think that one of the reasons that, we used the word equity at the second to last slide, but we also used the word access. And I think that one of the things we want to make sure that we don't do is treat equity like an add-on or its own little term, but instead weave it into everything we do. So when we start talking about access, wheelchair access, access to jobs, affordability, all of that is in the equity equation. On the one hand, it's disappointing that you don't see it called out more often, but hopefully it's also reassuring that it's baked in from the very beginning.
I'd like to add two pieces to the answers to the questions of the last two people. Our goal is not to create a plan that is in conflict with another plan the city has. It will either result in a synthesis and compromise between the two plans, hope that they will work together and support each other. We have enough conflict within the city in planning already, so I don't want to create any more of that. As for equity, this commission adopted an ordinance in December related to development that includes provisions to address social justice, racial equity, and equity abroad. So that will actually be required within our plan to actually address those things. Okay?
Right. And equity is, again, one of those criteria in the funding. So, yes, sir.
My turn?
Yeah.
Okay. So my first comment is that you can't just do mobility for mobility's sake. You've got to have like a mobility for a why. There has to be like a reason under it. And so that mobility reason actually has to be the constant, the good flow of our downtown area. And so the first thing that I think that we need to do, so the gentleman was talking about the access to the parking garage over here. There's a lot of parking spaces, and that's for the downtown, but nobody knows about it. So if we were to take the hard median out at First Ave South, so that people could take First Ave South and come right over here and go into that parking lot, or they can take First Ave South and go north, because right now it's a hard median. Take the hard median out just in that area so that you can go south and north at First Ave South. Okay, so that's going to allow you to get to your garage. And then you have a new light put in there, which is cool too. My second point is that we need to remove the house at 17 South M Street onto First Ave in between J and K, right next to the alley right there. So that puts that house into a place where you can really sell it. It allows that green area right next. Okay, my bad. Okay, so that was all for the garage area right there. And so parking is part of mobility. So again, removing that house from 17 M Street allows a lot more parking spaces there to increase your downtown mobility. So the last thing I wanted to say was that, so I've been working on a petition. It's almost done. I just need one bit of information that I think I might be able to get here. And when you do your petition, you've got to you outline your problem, your solution, then your demand. Okay? So the problem again is the middle school grade kids going across that bridge with all that crazy new. I mean, the diamond looks kind of cool, but it doesn't look very safe for all the kids. And so I actually have come up with a solution. I'm almost done with the petition. I just need one bit of information. So I've got the perfect spot for that bridge to go over the tracks in 95, okay? And I've actually written the demand as well. So the last thing that I need is how many kids a day cross the bridge to go to the middle school from this side to that side? I thought it was 200 at 400 trips a day, or it could be 400 kids at 800 trips a day. So that little bit of information is vital, and that's what I'm looking for. And then I'll be able to publish a really good petition that I've been working on for a long time. Anybody have that information?
Hi, I just want to address what Kareem and Todd, we have in public at our workshops discussed when they were talking about the 10th Avenue changes that they're going to make. We, at those workshops, I'm quite sure, said those kids are not safe and asked for that pedestrian bridge. It's been done before. There was one on 95, if you remember, which was taken down. I don't know why. So that's please don't think that we're not aware of that, and we all know that that's a problem, and we, in fact, have expressed that to DOT. And, more proactivity is fine, but it's not like we don't know that that's an issue.
Next lady down here. Well, she's been waiting around for a while, so I wanted to get her. Do you mind passing it back to her, please?
Hello, this is just going on with what Mayor Betty Rush said regarding the TPA meeting, the Citizens Advisory Board. They are meeting on May 3rd coming up. So if you are interested, I would write this down, put it in your cell phone, put it on your calendar. The TPA Citizens Advisory Board or a Citizens Advisory Committee. Basically, it's the citizens' eye view of ongoing transportation issues in Palm Beach County. And this is one meeting you really want to go to if you're really that concerned about middle schoolers and ADA, transportation, and all that stuff. You really should come to this meeting and present it to them because they're the money people. They have the money, the grants, and they're the ones that are willing to bring that to Lake Worth. We can only do so much and present and talk about ideas and complaints, but they're the ones that are actually going to execute. These meetings are held the first Wednesday of most months. It says to check the website calendar, but there is a meeting for May 3rd at 1:30 p.m., and it's at the TPA office, 301 Datura Street, West Palm Beach. So 301 Datura Street, May 3rd at 1:30 p.m. And the website is palmbeachtpa.org. If you want more information, I would definitely highly suggest and recommend going to those advisory committee, and that's where your voice can really have a stronger foothold for the city of Lake Worth.
Thank you.
Good morning. My thought was, my question is, I'm wondering, as you're doing your analysis, are you just confining it to Lake Worth Beach, or are you kind of trying to tie it in with the neighboring communities and looking at bigger projects like a light rail, an elevated rail, or something like that that would tie in a number of towns and not just keeping it local?
Right. To be honest, we are going to focus largely on Lake Worth Beach, if not 100%. There are, of course, things flow, so you can't ignore boundaries and things of that nature. So if we find something, so for example, these circulators, if there is a desire to have routes that cross the city limit, then certainly we would take that into account. Everything's going to really depend on two things. Number one, your input, and number two, our analysis of where the hot spots are and where the greatest needs are. Those two things together are going to largely drive this plan.
I want to talk about something a little bit different. You had a slide up there earlier about pedestrian crosswalk and what have you.
Yes.
We have another issue here, and that's visibility of crossing streets. Mm-hmm. So especially east of Federal, between that and the bridge, trying to cross Lake and Lucerne, the parking's, and I hate the idea of taking parking away, but the parking is too close to the sidewalk. Mm-hmm. You have to pull out in the street to be able to see. And then we have other intersections where we're just not enforcing the visibility. Jamie, I'll send you that list from our neighborhood. I did it yesterday, so I'll send it to you. But we need to start enforcing that, because when I saw that and I saw those boxes up there, it's like, well, wait a minute, can traffic see around this, coming across?
No, that's a very good point. There is a term called daylighting, and that's actually a growing concept, and that is removing the parking closest to the intersections so that there's more visibility. Certainly, wherever there's high pedestrian activity, that would constitute something we would highlight.
In regards to regional transit, we have been studied several times through our TOD program by the EPA, by Treasure Coast, by the TPA, and so the parking lot item that Tom mentioned is an area to put regional transit like the East Coast Link and other items where Lake Worth Beach will be supportive of those to hopefully force the issue and it be a regional response versus just a singular response in Lake Worth Beach. So we are going to focus on Lake Worth Beach, but there are going to be items and ideas that are going to come out of it that are going to sit in an area where we need to collaborate with other entities once this plan is already finished. I'm here, so I want to...
Oh, you're going to make me walk down there. I'd just like to say, as Christopher McFoy, the vice mayor here, I'm thrilled that people are here. I think it's wonderful that we are being exposed to the best of current thinking that's happening around the country, what things worked, what things are not working. And I really encourage all of us to dig in a little bit, some of the data that is available through this study is really informative. Like the idea that 50-60% of trips are less than 3 miles. That tells you that if you think about the speed that that person is going, it backs up the idea that really you slow down, you do different things with a complete street. It may make an insignificant difference in your arrival time, and it in fact may speed it up. So thinking about things in ways that we haven't usually thought about, being open to what we're seeing every day is that there's more electric bicycles and more electric scooters. How can we make things safer for everybody? It is no fun as a car driver to know that there are more modes of transportation and you can't see the people. And now, run somebody over. That's not fun. The solution isn't, eliminate other forms of transportation. The solution is use some of these best ideas to bring us safer for everybody and a better mix of ways to get around. So I'm thrilled with what's happening. I'm thrilled that there are a lot of people here involved.
This will be our last question, and then we're going to get into some other activities while lunch is being served. You're the last question. And lunch is going to be here shortly.
Thank you so much. My name is Richard Stowe. Just for the record, I did actually walk here from my house, which is, I'm not sure how, it's mid-block 4th Avenue North and Federal Highway. For those of us who were late in coming, including our esteemed 1st District Commissioner, Sarah Malega, welcome. I did want to yeah, love you too. I did want to give you what the dictionary definition of mobility, and that is frequently the quality of being mobile. And what does mobile mean? Capable of moving or being moved readily. And the secondary definition of mobile is utilizing motor vehicles for ready movement. So here's the question. I'm going to make some comments and questions. One of the questions I have, starting out, we're working on this, what is the current modal split of our activities? I think we need that as a baseline to then, down the road, figure out, do that same test after we go through these exercises. The second thing is part of this mobility, and it's not clear to me, is there a goal to have a modal shift where you go from 99% vehicular movements to 93, you have an uptick in what? Walking, cycling, electrified, whatevers, bus, and then one other topic that has been touched on is rail. Someone mentioned that, and there's a track right there called the FEC, the Florida East Coast Rail, which really established these communities in South Florida in the early 1900s. And there is vacant land right across the street, and you can almost see it by going out the door here in that direction. And that is the site where from 1912 to 1965, the FEC rail station was located. The question is, does the city want to invest in that so that there is the possibility of working with Brightline, and Brightline working with the South Florida Regional Rail Authority to provide service from Lake Worth? Because I have spoken to the communications director for FEC, or it's not FEC, actually Brightline, and Lake Worth is not on the agenda right now. They did put a station in Boca, so there is possibility. But the question is, how do we get there? Because that can affect the modal split. And for example, if we want to have more activity, we have a great street petting festival. Is really a class 1 event, because it draws a lot of people from the region and also out of the region. And a rail station there would be helpful just one day a year, but I think we want to do more than just 1 day a year of excitement in Lake Worth. The third thing, I'm losing count, but there was talk about parking and I mean, I would say that like you have mobility, but there's also parking, storage, and circulation. You have to look at that together. And there is a book called Parking in the City by Donald Shoup. It is extremely informative, and if people read that book or read chapters of it, it may shift your view of the need for parking and more importantly, the management of parking. And is the management of parking such as the variable price parking in areas, in our commercial areas, is that something that can be considered to include in this? Finally, there was a little bit of discussion about neighborhoods and like circulation neighborhoods. Will the city consider looking at many roundabouts on residential and collector streets? And as part of this program, will native shade trees will there be investment in native shade trees to improve the quality of walkability? So thank you, and I see William here, so I'm going to hand it right to him.
We have limited time. So we're going to go into our activities.
I can answer those questions rapidly. Brightline is probably one of those longer-term efforts, and because we've got a 4-year clock going for some of this infrastructure money, we'll probably pay more attention to Tri-Rail. As for parking, yes, we will be looking at parking management, performance-based parking. Thank you for bringing up Donald Shoup. I feel like one of our outreach events ought to be parking nerd night so that everybody wants to nerd out on parking and how we do that. But I want to hand it over to Angela, who's going to talk about the different activities we do. This has been thrilling, honestly, as a parking nerd and mobility nerd, because the questions were so thoughtful and shows us citizen expertise that's needed as we go forward. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Okay, so I've got a couple activities for you guys to do before we get lunch set up. I saw the lunch bus arriving, so it should be here shortly. On your tables, you see little speech bubbles. So one of the things that we'd like everybody to do before you get up, before you leave the table, is to fill out on the speech bubble what you want to see the goals of this plan to be. And we heard a little bit in some of the Q&A, so if you've already stated your kind of what you want the goals to be or objectives, you can put that down again. Or if you have any other questions, you can add that. Bring those bubbles to one of our teammates, and we'll put them up on the wall, and we will discuss them while you guys are sitting for lunch. All right. You guys, okay. We got a couple activities then behind me as well. You guys couldn't understand me? Okay, let me try again. So you guys have speech bubbles at the table. What we ask for you to do is to fill out, before you get up and move around, to fill out those speech bubbles with what you want the goals of the mobility plan to be, or the goals of the project, or some goals you'd like to see. So we heard accessibility, we heard shade trees, walkability, parking. You mean to repeat it again? Okay, if everybody could just keep quiet for a minute, I'm going to say this one last time because we've got some other activities to get through. Okay. On your table, there's the colored paper, speech bubbles. If you guys could fill out what you want to see the goals of the mobility plan to be. So we heard some of that already today about accessibility, walkability, parking, shade, Fill out on those bubbles and hand them to one of the teammates, and we'll put them on the wall, and then we'll discuss those while you guys are sitting back down eating lunch. Nope, per person. You can fill out as many as you want, even if there's extras. Okay, second activity. We have a little trivia wheel over here. And you can do these in any order. Please kind of spread out so that we don't get backlogged at any one station. So we've got a trivia wheel over here with different types of mobility modes, and we'll have some Q&A associated with those. Spin the wheel. We've got boards behind us with some information on the plan. You'll see traditional modes of transportation and emerging modes of transportation. So when Lisa was showing those earlier, it's the same slides, same modes that were on those slides. We're going to give you dots and fill out which dots you think would be great for Lake Worth Beach and which ones you think, no, we don't want to really consider those. But we've got some of the scooters, electric skateboards, gondolas. They're all up on that board. So please give us your feedback in that manner. And then finally, we have a big map on the wall. So for those of you that mentioned like specific intersections or crossings where you see problems, same thing. We're going to give you color dots. Put a dot on the area where you think that there's an issue today, red dot, and then put a green dot for maybe areas that are working pretty well, that are walkable, or you enjoy the mobility access in those areas. Once you finish those activities, we'll have lunch set up, and then we'll ask everybody to take a seat, and we'll do our wrap-up. Get you out of here by 1 o'clock. Okay? Thank you. Thank you. Hey guys, if I could get everyone's attention, we're gonna have some concluding thoughts and wrap this up. You can just turn it back over. You can just stop talking. Thank you. Thank you. All right. We'll get you guys out of here now that we got you fed and happy with lunch. So thank you again for coming out this morning and spending time with us. We're pretty excited about the turnout and think we've gotten a lot of really interesting feedback and things that we wouldn't have known without speaking with you guys. So Amish here is going to kind of summarize some of the goals and the thoughts that we see on the speech bubbles and maybe some new thoughts that we didn't talk about earlier.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Amish Dave, and just to summarize the bubbles from what we have seen so far, and some of the most common ones that we have seen is safety is number one, and that's number one, and then more parking in the downtown area as well, and then implementing a sort of a BRTS system where there's dedicated bus lanes. And that does not interfere with the regular flow of traffic. Then more ADA accessibility as well, increased walkability, increased friendliness for pedestrians and cars so that, cars don't park on the sidewalks and don't illegally park in places that they're not supposed to. And also integrating public transportation to major hubs such as the beach and also the downtown area in West Palm and Lake Worth. And thank you.
All right, thank you. So then just to summarize some of the feedback we got on the map, we had a lot of really good discussions from you guys on that as well and some new ideas that came to light. A lot of talk about using the alleys. That was something I don't think we had too much of a presentation, but I think is an amenity that makes Lake Worth unique by your alley system and the fact that you have preserved and kept a lot of those alleys. We got some good ideas for locations for complete streets projects, some good ideas for connections to areas outside of the city. So how part of what our study and part of what we'll look at is projects that West Palm has in the works, that the TPA, that the county, that Lantana is working on, how we can improve those connections and improve those projects that maybe they're already doing and have them connect through to Lake Worth Beach as well. We talked about connections to the beach, that's an obvious one, but also to the college. So while it's not within the city limits, how can we, again, improve some of that connectivity to those major centers of activity that maybe aren't necessarily within the city limits, but may, again, connect to other projects that other agencies maybe have planned in the works. And all of this, just so you guys know, I saw you guys taking pictures and things. We're going to document all of this, take photos, put it on the website. So the QR code that's on there will take you to a dedicated web page for the project. One of the things we want to point out to everybody and to be on the lookout for is a survey that's going to be coming out. So we'll have, that's going to be a really important way for us to communicate with the community and get additional feedback from you guys, but also from those of you who, people who weren't able to make it today. So we're going to keep updating that website and keep putting information out, and please kind of be on the lookout for that survey, and we encourage everyone to participate in that as well. Does have any concluding thoughts, William?
Well, again, thank you for coming. We really appreciate the turnout. Based on the responses we had yesterday, I was a little trepidatious about how many we were going to have, but this has been very edifying to all of us, and we got some really great feedback, and thank you for coming. And don't stop sending us ideas. As I tell my staff, sometimes there's no stupid questions or ideas, or just stupid answers sometimes, which often come from me. But we do have a little gift bag for you as you leave. There, either you can have an orange one or a purple one, and just grab one. And if you don't want one, we're not going to, penalize you for not taking it with you. And again, still stay. We're going to keep up the city's little website presence as well, and we're going to work with the website person to make sure that has information from this. Hopefully, we're going to have this whole presentation there that people can revisit it and watch it at their leisure. Some other things will be posted on there as we move along in the schedule. And also there will be a budget discussion about Phase 2 coming up during the budget season, probably in August. Rams, you had a question?
Is there a way for the city to put a link? I know you have that thing scanned
Yeah, we're going to do a link to their website from ours. Yes, of course. So anyway, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the beautiful day. And make the most of Lake Worth Beach. And we didn't feed you too much, so now you can go support the restaurants downtown.
Thank you.